I just saw a dude get shot in the chest. Also, I got Subway.
What happened to hi? Hello? How are you?
Over the past few months, I've had a fair share of absolutely wild stories like that. Vascular surgery gave me plenty of those where I can distinctly recount getting called in the middle of the night for a femoral artery bleed, something that can DC someone to JC in just a few minutes, and plenty of emergent OR activations for ischemic limbs, bleeding, or worsening aortic aneurysms. Then going from there back to the ICU and cardiac ICUs and going from code to code to code. The natural way to process half of it is just to talk about it. Common exercises in trauma bonding between co-residents of the same program and even residents from other programs around the country. But do you ever just sit with your friends chatting, laughing until all of a sudden silence? And then you go, hey guys, that might have been a little traumatic.
Did you ever think just take a step back? Because did I tell you about the dude that was paracoding for 2 hours on my first night?
Yeah.
I've told the other cards fellow and everything that everything that happened. I've been telling people what all's been going on. And I feel like if I told anybody else just the absolute dumpster fires that we've witnessed, they'd just be like, dude, are you okay? And the answer would be, not really. I don't know, maybe you're okay.
I'm mentally ill.
That's why we're both in anesthesia.
Are any of us okay? If you scroll on social media too, or literally talk to anyone in healthcare, it's a fairly common theme for us all to be at some level desensitized to some of the objectively very traumatic things that we see on a day-to-day basis. But also that makes me wonder just why? Are there ways to combat it? Because if the rest of the world looks at us like we've got a screw loose, is there some truth to it, or is it just a product of constant exposure?
This other guy, he got beat with a cane and stabbed.
One of my close friends is a pediatrics resident and young adult author, Tyler. He's currently enrolled in an online course put on by Harvard Medical School on the importance of media in medicine and to a greater extent, storytelling. In one of his earliest lectures, they popped up a graphic that I'm gonna put on screen right now. Pause it, sit with it, but let me quickly interpret. What is depicted on screen are two graphs, brutally descripts how we should versus how we do view human lives, especially in this era of mass media. I don't think I'm making necessarily a controversial statement when I say every life should have value, every life does matter. And absolutely any medical student, nurse, doctor, just RT, any medical professional, if they lose a patient, they're gonna be distraught. They remember everything that comes with it. But the more you lose, the more the faces, the names, and the memories of each one start to blur together. And then the two things on the right graph, the psychic numbing and the compassion collapse. It speaks to this phenomenon that, especially in the news, when you see one person affected by an ailment, one person or two people affected by a disaster, you feel a ton of compassion towards them and a unique desire, an innate desire to really help them and care for them and feel exactly what they're feeling. But when it happens to 300 instead of 3,000 instead of 300, people become less individual stories and more statistics. And everyone gets to a certain number point where you can no longer have the same amount of empathy and care for every single one of those situations, or you're just going to be entirely dry of empathy. Therefore, you just, for better or worse, stop caring, or at least attempt to stop feeling as much. We see it all the time in the news, but I can tell you from a first-hand experience, this happens to people in the hospital, healthcare workers, real fast.
How many open fractures have you seen? Just this week?
Probably one a day.
Oh, that's not bad actually. That's not terrible. Dude, guess how many people we lost on our team in my last ICU rotation in 2 weeks?
14.
Close. Dude, we lost 10. It was 10 people in 2 weeks. That's just our team. To be fair, a lot of them were post-ROSC patients that were not gonna make it, but that's a brutal. That's almost once a day. Not ideal, man.
Now, there's a lot more to that Harvard course, a course that I very much want to take when I get a little bit more free time because, yes, it has emphasis in media and medicine. It brings value to me as someone with a professional background in photography, videography, but its emphasis lies in how to choose what stories to tell and how to communicate it effectively in all mediums. The leaders and lecturers of that course are literally the writers, producers, authors of your household names like House MD, Grey's Anatomy, and so much more. Even big hits like The Pit from HBO, a show I highly, highly recommend. But if you've watched any of those shows, why do the stories that affect those characters hit so much harder than the stories that you hear on the news, even though the same things might be happening to both people? And one is real and one is based on a real story. Say you wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon one day. There's a lot of orthopedic surgeons out there. You can find general resources on the day-to-day, what application materials might help you get into medical school and match into orthopedic surgery, but that can apply to anyone. It doesn't apply to you, it doesn't speak directly to you. But say if you take one orthopedic surgeon, let them tell their story in a narrative way instead of an instructional format. Let them show how they did it, what roadblocks they overcome, and how much the field means to them. You begin to take bits and pieces of their story and digest it in a different way. A lecture style format is how we're all used to being taught in school, but tell me, have you ever related to chapter 3.2 of the back of the textbook on the coagulation cascade? But I guarantee you, if you hear your co-resident talk about an emergency in a surgery where they had to reverse heparin with protamine sulfate, you'll probably remember better where heparin acts in the coagulation cascade. Same way works with telling stories about humanity. Your humanity. The good and the bad, for better and worse. I had a recent conversation with a good friend of mine where we talked about relationships and how everybody brings their baggage to the table and you have two decisions to make. It's either you trip all over it or you help pick each other's up. Because everyone has unique experiences that they have in life. And I'm a big believer in there are no bad experiences unless you refuse to take the lessons learned out of that situation. Which is where I want to highlight, I think, a very underrated tool in keeping humanity in medicine, and that is the debrief. But before I get into that, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Motivate MD, because they share the same value that I do in personal stories for the medical school and residency applications. Motivate MD is a medical school and residency application prep service made by actively practicing physicians for the future physicians, built on the sincere premise that your story deserves to be told in the best way possible. It's a breath of fresh air support system that prioritizes making sure that you are so much more than a test score or a line on your CV. Everyone has their own unique experiences and lessons learned that brought them to the field of medicine, but oftentimes you need help to articulate the fine details in a way that will blow away any reader. With a diverse team of over 100 medical students and doctors across over 90 medical schools around the US, the team of essay reviewers, CV editors, and mock interviewers are sure to help make medical schools and residency programs value what you bring to the table as an applicant. The team is personable and 24/7, with you being in direct contact with the core team for any lingering questions or concerns. And beyond the essays and on-paper application materials, this team has seen both sides of the admissions process and are most in touch with the emotions of the applicant because they are all actively practicing physicians and current medical students, something many other services cannot say. Everyone has a unique story. Motivate MD's team will help you tell it. Visit the links in the description to learn more and use the code NDMD for 10% off any package. Best of luck to all those applying to medical school or the match, and I look forward to seeing all your celebrations of your success. So what is a debrief? Because I think it is a term thrown around in medical education all the time that is such a valuable tool that is rarely used or rarely remembered to be used more often than not. Whenever anything traumatic happens, whether that be a code, a really rough, goals of care conversation, or just an emotionally challenging case where there's a lot of different family involved, or say all of a sudden you relate to them culturally and you feel personally impacted by the patient that you're caring for. all of these are grounds for a debrief with your team and what I hope to be your superiors, whether that be your attending, your fellow, etc. And it sounds like a fancy term, but it's more just like, can we time out and just take a second to talk about what in the world just happened? Because the first step to getting better is acknowledging that things are kind of crazy, which sounds like the bare minimum, but like it's out of all the like really traumatic things I've seen in residency so far, I can count on one hand the amount of times that we've debriefed from those situations. Because most of the time things happen and then you just move on to the next. Things are so busy that you're like, wow, give it a damn, that's crazy. And then like the next patient needs your help, or you have 3 notes to write. And it's not until like you come home and you call your friends, your family, that you're like, this is dark. But it takes like a few hours of you bottling it up inside for it to just blow up when you get home. When if addressed immediately afterwards, or at least at the site that it happened, a lot of those bottled up emotions can instead be processed healthier and lead to a lot less of that psychological numbing that you get on that graph. And I'm being so for real right now. It doesn't take much. You just ask your attending or your senior resident, like, hey, can we debrief real quick? And 99% of the time, if you ask, they'll say yes. And the times that I asked, I'm so grateful for. And the times that my attending asked for us, I was so thankful for, because it was like this rare moment of like, wow, I'm being acknowledged that this is a really cruddy situation. Again, sounds like the bare minimum, but does it often happen? No. And I truly do believe in order for us all to like not be so numb all the time or grow numb, because I think a lot of people go into healthcare wanting to help out, they have the best intentions, and then the system and just repeated offense beats them down to a point of like not acknowledging things anymore. Debriefing it and talking about it and asking, hey, what happened? What can we do better? What are things that are out of your control that no matter what wouldn't have changed? And then what lessons can we learn out of this? Because like I said, if you don't take a lesson out of your experience, that's when the experience isn't worth it. And that's when we as people should get a lot more worried. When we start to ignore the faults of our past and fall into the whole insanity saying of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting different results. And in medicine, lives are too precious to keep doing that. So in this video, I do want to offer a safe space, especially for the people in surgery, emergency medicine, the EMTs, flight medics, nurses, PAs. Actually, you know what, screw it. Anybody who has some sort of traumatic witnessed event recently, spare the details, but let it go in the comments, because I do think there are people around all over the world that might be experiencing the same thing as you and might have a word of advice on how they handle it and can share the lessons they learned from their situation, and maybe it could help yours as well. Tell your story, because it does matter, but sometimes you need help trying to figure out what lessons need to be learned from your situation. Debrief with each other. Please don't go numb, and know that you always have a shoulder to lean on and an ear to listen to you yap, at least here on this channel. Cheers, be kind to each other. See you in the next one.